Is she really going out with him?
So this is my collection of Gibson Les Paul Goldtops. They're all from the 1950s and 1960s, beginning with a 1952, 53, 54, 55, and 56 Goldtop. And on the far left in the back is a 1968 Goldtop, and on the far right in the back between the 55 and 56 you see a 1969 Goldtop. All of these guitars are 100% original pieces, except for the 1969 Goldtop, which is heavily modified, and I'll explain a little bit more about that. And the 1952 has a temporary Mojo Axe tailpiece for easier playing. However, the original tailpiece, we have that as well, and that goes right back on the guitar. My goal with this collection really was to capture the evolution of the Les Paul from 1952 through 1956. Let's take a closer look. Actually, I'm going to begin with this 1953 Les Paul. This is an early 1953. It's identical to what you would find in a 1952 Les Paul as well. The trapeze tailpiece, half-inch knobs, P90s, no poker chip up here, and you'll notice on the headstock the I in Gibson is separated from the G. So this is a one-piece mahogany body, one-piece neck, Brazilian rosewood, and the small frets. This is a 1953, but also identical to a 1952. Another 1952, which is very early 1952. They say between 12 and 100 of these were made. Gibson records are not clear on this, but they are the very first Gibson Les Pauls ever made. And here is one of those. And you'll be able to see several differences between this guitar and the 53 that I just showed you earlier. On this guitar, you can see that the bridge P90 pickup has diagonal screws here and here, whereas afterwards they didn't have that. It also has knobs that are 5/8 inch knobs, not half-inch knobs. Again, one-piece body, one-piece neck, Brazilian rosewood. And here you'll notice on the headstock, the I in Gibson is actually touching the G, and that's not the case in the rest of the 1952 and 53 Les Pauls. The other thing you'll notice is there's no binding on the neck for the very first Les Pauls. After that, they started the binding here as well. So 1954, we have a better angled neck, and we have what's called the stop tail wraparound bridge. Still both with P90s. They added the poker chip for the rhythm and treble switch. Again, half-inch knobs like the 53. One-piece body, one-piece neck. From 1954 to 1955, the difference is quite subtle, yet this makes for just an amazing guitar, sounding, playing guitar, just a wonderful instrument here. The main difference is that the stop tail piece has a wider wing that goes around the nuts on the edge, because the 54 would break more easily here. So they replaced the stop tail with wider wings. This is an excellent example of a 1955, just plays and sounds amazing. Let's take a look at the 1956, which was a huge year in the evolution of the Les Paul because it was this year that they introduced the ABR Tunematic bridge. And this system with the ABR Tunematic together with the stoptail has become the bridge system for all Les Pauls even to today. This one is completely gold. Now, Gibson stopped manufacturing the Les Paul in 1960 and would only start to produce them again in 1968. So 1968 and 69 are considered very important years for the Les Paul. Some people say it's the closest you can get to an original 50s Les Paul. So let's take a look at a couple of the late 1960s Les Pauls. I have here a beautiful specimen of a very early, one of the very first 1968 Les Pauls. We know that it's one of the very first because of the crown inlay up here instead of the Les Paul decal. It also says Les Paul in the truss rod cover cap. Other features that show this as a very early one is the serial number, meaning that it was manufactured in the first few weeks of production in 1968. And this button strap knob is placed higher on this guitar so it would slip off easily. This was some of the teething mistakes they made in the reproduction of these guitars in very early 1968. They corrected it and moved this knob farther in so that it wouldn't slip off as easy when playing. Let's take a look at the 1969 Les Paul. This one is highly modified, which is a little different from me. What you might call a player 1969, but it's got a very special story. This guitar is heavily worn, as you can see, beautiful wear throughout this guitar. The owner originally added back in late 1969, early 70s, a phase switch, and he also replaced the P90s with humbucker pickups. What makes this guitar special is not only how cool it looks and how great it sounds, but it was owned by famed studio musician Jimmy Calvert. Jimmy Calvert was the guitar player for Tommy James and the Shondells, played on Money Money and many other famous songs, and co-wrote songs with Tommy James and the Shondells. Now that was before this guitar was made. However, after this guitar was made and bought by him in 1969, it was used in many studio recordings that he did for John Lennon and for Ringo Starr, and on tour with both of those musicians. So it's a very heavily toured guitar and a very heavily used studio guitar. I love the modification and the sound. Great example of a highly modified 1969 Les Paul. One-piece body, one-piece neck.